Here with their analysis, Saul Wisenberg, Fox News contributor and former deputy independent counsel, and Mike Davis, Article 3 project president, former law clerk to Justice Neil Gorsuch. Saul, let's start with you. The details are still coming in, but your initial thoughts about this charge, 18 U.S.C. 372, I believe, conspiracy to impede federal agents. Could this stick?
Well, they certainly have a right to investigate it, and some of the statements made by the governor and certainly the mayor are very disturbing. As you know, it's hard to go after people for even under federal criminal statutes for conduct that is pure speech. So we'll have to wait and see how the facts develop. But the idea that you would not be able to start an investigation based upon this, I completely reject.
And when we talk about using language and words, and let's go to Mike on this, it's really language and words that lead to action on the part of the agitators on the ground. When you're telling them to film, to track, and calling this an invasion, Mike, that comes pretty close to incitement. And one would think you get text messages and you get emails, and the story might actually get a lot spicier for them.
Yeah, under the Constitution, our U.S. Congress writes our immigration laws on behalf of the American people. Congress decides who gets to come and who has to go, and the president has a constitutional duty to enforce those federal immigration laws. That is the supreme law of the land, and these local governors, these local mayors cannot interfere with federal immigration enforcement. That is not only is it assaults on federal law enforcement, you're looking at insurrection and seditious conspiracy, along with harboring, conspiracy in general, and many other serious federal felonies when you are inciting people to commit violent acts to physically obstruct federal law enforcement. So I would say to Governor Walz and to Mayor Frey, you better back down or you're going to end up in federal prison.
Yeah, Saul, there's a lot of movement here because on the one hand, you hear Walz and sometimes Frey say things like, you know, don't take the bait, don't give them the moment they want. And so they try to kind of say, be careful. Even Ilhan Omar today, you know, said, essentially don't throw things at agents. But then in the next breath, it's track, follow, invasion. These are, tactics of an authoritarian. So it's a bit of a murky legal analysis, but the investigation itself, again, I would imagine would elicit a lot more evidence if the government really wants to go this route.
Boy, she's really going out on a limb by saying don't throw things at agents. Wow, what a peacemaker she is. Look, people should listen to what Mike just said. A lot of this activity, take a look. I encourage everybody to take a look at Title 10 United States Code, Section 253. If Trump wanted to, if you look at the language of that statute, he could invoke the Insurrection Act. It would be a very, very controversial move. But certainly, if you look at the language of that statute, which talks about preventing any combination or conspiracy that obstructs the laws of the United States and enforcement of the laws of the United States, and the president gets to make that determination, it's not even completely clear whether or not that would be subject to judicial review. So in one sense, he's actually potentially diffusing the situation by just investigating two public servants for obstruction. People need to be need to be very careful. You know, President Trump is blessed by his enemies sometimes.
Yeah, and we're going to post the entire 10 U.S.C. 331 to 335 for people to read for themselves, and they'll see the statute's terms and why this certainly seems to a lot of people, given this sustained violence and interruption, interference with the lawful duties that these ICE agents are carrying out.
Yeah.
Man, I mean, it would seem to be kind of in many ways, picture perfect for invoking the Insurrection Act.
Yeah.
Yet, Mike, President Trump today seemed to maybe signal that he was leaning against the Insurrection Act. Watch this.
It's been used a lot. And if I needed it, I'd use it. I don't think there's any reason right now to use it. But if I needed it, I'd use it. It's very powerful.
Those
So,
are the wrong numbers,
Mike, it hasn't been
Laura.
invoked in what?
I need to say.
Go ahead. What?
It's 251. It's
I would
10
say this
U.S.C.
too,
251 through 255. Yeah.
Got it. Sorry, I'm looking.
Sorry.
I'm looking for the
I would say- I would-
other parts of the authority. Go ahead, Mike.
I would say this to Governor Tim Walz and to Mayor Jacob Frey. President Trump is trying to give you an off-ramp here. You should take the off-ramp. We do not want to turn Minneapolis into Mogadishu. Let's not have another Black Hawk Down situation. Take the off-ramp and don't escalate this where President Trump has to invoke the Insurrection Act and has to nationalize, federalize the Minnesota National Guard or send in active duty troops to clean up the mess that Governor Walz and Mayor Frey have caused.
Saul, there seems to be an increasing effort on the part of young legislators. I haven't been around Washington all that long, and we're going to cue it up. Max Frost is, I believe, is he the youngest member of Congress? I believe, if not the youngest, one of the youngest. But where they're kind of, it's like they're so young, they're getting in on the quote fun of the agitation set. We'll play this, given what's happening now in Florida. Watch.
I am a member of the Oversight Committee of the United States government. And a few months ago, we launched a portal where people can report abuses and ICE activity. We'll put that link up as well. Please be vigilant and report anything that you see. My office will be working with local partners to investigate further on what's going on and also how it impacts you.
Well, he said, and maybe we edited it out, but he said in the clip that I watched that he understands that ICE agents are staying in hotels in Central Florida. Now, what's that? Why would he say that? And again, I don't know if we edited out of that clip, but why would he say that? Why would you have to mention where ICE officers are staying, Saul? Implicit in that.
Because he's a publicity-hungry fool. Look, I don't mind if you set up a number where you can report abuses by ICE officers,
Sure.
but that's very different. It's very clear. You cannot obstruct or impede federal law enforcement officers. And when you go from place to place and you have an ICE watch and you're following them from place to place, you better be very careful what your people do when they get there.
Well, we saw a week ago tonight people trying to breach the Canopy Hilton in Minneapolis, push their way through the doorway. If there weren't 3 brave security guards there, I don't know what they would have done if they found ICE agents who were, I guess, unarmed. But that seems to be what their effort was geared toward, driving people out, frightening them, or worse, assaulting them. Saul and Mike will be following all aspects of this. Thank you very much for the legal analysis tonight.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.